Hi, I'm Abby Walker, and I'm going to be talking about the mathematical, educational, history, and growth in the Yupik people of Alaska within culture and traditions. And the Yupik people had many difficult encounters with outsiders, or the white man coming to their lands and taking over what they owe, especially when the group was in pursuit of education in Alaska. The Yupik people are an Eskimo people located in southwest Alaska with an estimated population back when they were first contacted of Nunavut 500, Yukon Kuskokwim 13,000, and Bristol Bay 3,000. And they depended highly on the ocean for subsistence in fishing, hunting, and gathering for food. As a way of teaching, the elders would tell stories of traditional ways of life as their way to teach the young generation survival skills and their heritage. And as Barnhart spoke about in 2001, he said newly formed groups of Alaska Native educators attempt to forge alternative paths of educational reform by building on the past and the wisdom of their elders. And the Yupik Eskimo elders have their own system of perceiving, dividing, and locating points in space. This is supported by rich lexicon of sabbatical words and experiences situated in traveling across the vast tundra, and they have their own system and way of quantifying and counting, including a base 20 system with sub-base 5. The embedded mathematics is part of their culture and linguistic heritage, and it continues to be reinforced today by living off the bounty of land and sea. And spoken by Lipka and Adams. And as you can see in the picture to the right, this is what the Yupik children used, a base 20 abacus. And as you can see in the visual, that the children used, as what our feet and toes have, 5 toes, 5 fingers, and they use this as counting in base 20. And it's just using the whole body, including your hands and feet. And in 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from the Russian government. After this, primarily educational efforts were made by missionary groups. The Moravian Protestant and Jesuit Catholic missionaries had the greatest influence in Yupik communities. And in 1874, a gathering started the framework for the Committee Agreement or mission plans for Alaska. In 1884, the Organic Act was passed, leading all school-age children in Alaska, regardless of race, are entitled to an education. And as a result, the specific Christian dominations were assigned to the different geographic Alaska regions. The missionaries impacted Alaska Natives statewide, including Southwest Alaska with the Yupik Eskimos. The Moravians came as teachers and missionaries to bring the good life as well as good news that the Eskimos could enter heaven and be freed from their pagan, poverty-stricken life. They saw it as their call to endure their hardships until American modernity would come and ease their lot and bring further enlightenment to the river Eskimos. And along with that came disease. With the white man coming into the native villages, it affected the education for native children by the disease that they brought with them as well. The native communities were often devastated by widespread diseases. The epidemics ran rampant through a community as families disintegrated by death or separation due to disease. And there was loss of elders and traditional native knowledge. Their children were often taught traditional ways by the grandparents, but the loss of these elders directly ruined the rich educational experiences of the native children. And during outbreaks of these diseases, native children in rural communities were often separated from their parents and sent to live in mission schools in or outside of Alaska due to villages devastated by diseases. And more directly, the impact of these diseases led to the distraught of traditional religious beliefs, including the power of the shaman. This distraught created the opportunity for missionaries to have a greater influence on the tribes, leading the Western man control of religious language and educational decisions in the villages. And as further along as years go by, the MCC was then created. And the MCC stands for Math in Cultural Context. And it was developed from ethnographic work with Yupik elders and teachers. And the need for cultural-based curricular seems obvious to those in the field of educational anthropology, but not seriously to policy makers. And the MCC was based on Yupik cultural knowledge and norms, and it seeks to bridge the culture of these communities with this development at the schools. And the definition used of cultural-based math education includes math content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and contextual knowledge. And all of those are ways for the knowledge of cultural-based math. There was an example that was used called a fish rack that students would have to build an actual fish rack and structure as the picture below, which is just a rack to dry your salmon meat. And to build a fish rack that's similar structure and the four corners must form a rectangle. And then working with the elders in Fairbanks, they built a video recording that constructed a fish rack. This activity connected everyday knowledge to school-based knowledge. Elders first eyeballed space, laying out markers for the four corners. Further adjustments were made. Then the rope was used to measure each diagonal and to square the rectangle. Using the axe handle, they created a unit of measure for the posts, using body measurements to mark the length of each side of the rectangular base. This further brought out challenging works of math, more challenging than a textbook. They did the literal work constructed with actual material rather than just usual visual thinking it from a textbook. The MCC showcases that it can alter the social organizations and communications in a classroom. Now, in the past time, Jerry Lipka went out and researched of the education in many rural Native Alaska villages. But she furthered her education in Yupik culture to work with the elders and was able to build 10 cultural-based mathematical lessons for elementary school students. And to the Yupik people, on viewing measurements, they see the human body as a tool to measure such things as small items, as a piece of wood, or the land between different features of the area. In an article that was stated that in the new mathematical lessons, a retired teacher demonstrated how they measured by using a portion of their forefinger, as shown in the visual below. And the hand and open, and they would also use their hand to open and close configurations, one in both outstretched arms and more. And then the part of the math in cultural context, as explained before, many schools have been using this method across Alaska by research showing that students from many Alaska tribes, as well as non-native students, show improvement in test scores and outperform their peers while they use the system. Through this lesson, children develop skills in measuring, which leads to understanding numbers, proportional geometry, algebra, data collection, and graphing probability, and more. There's a model they use for elementary called Patterns and Parkas, which investigates the principles of geometry by folding an uneven item to create a symmetrical form, such as a square or circle. This can be used for practical use, like making a parka with border patterns. Another way they used for students was called star navigation, and this was for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to use cultural knowledge about angles and the stars to determine location, direction, and distance. And in salmon fishing for 6th and 7th graders, it integrated probability and environmental science as they study salmon species and their life cycles. And this curriculum supported Yupik culture and values. They have the classroom be child-centered while working together. And by having the children be able to go home and see a family using everyday tasks in their lives and how it correlates with the lessons they're learning in school, especially with math. And this work has traveled even outside of Alaska to international countries with similar works, but pertains more to their cultural and lifestyles. And as the lessons continues to be used, the growth and work are ongoing by meetings with elders to figure out other ways to make mathematical embedded in Yupik daily activities. And the Yupik people have been through tough times in their past lives and also through some potential growth in their communities. But when it came to through diseases or overtaking of other white men coming onto their lands, the accident events in their lives can make or break them, but they were able to trust and learn and grow and continue with their traditions and cultures in their lives. And then as teachers and educators are taking the time to get to know the people they are teaching, to better a student will be willing to take the time and listen to learn what the people they are teaching to. As time changes, so shall the educational lessons that are taught to our children, and to be respectful of one's culture and traditions and help shape their growth within their lives. Thank you. Have a great rest of your break, everyone.